Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the June 1st, 2022 Grants Pass City Council meeting, and we start our meetings off with a moment of silence. I think we have a lot to think about this evening, so please take a moment. And please rise for the flag salute.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, we don't have anyone on the phone this evening, right? Okay, so we are missing Councilor Fazer and Councilor Lovelace. Somebody else, and Rob Pell, Councilor Pell. Okay. And we're going to start off with a presentation. We have a recognition of our AmeriCorps volunteers, and it looks like we have a good crew in the audience tonight. And I believe, Rick, were you going to say something?
Good evening. How's everyone today?
Good, thank you.
So my name is Rick McClintock. I'm your Firewise Coordinator for the City of Grants Pass. I was fortunate enough, Susan Clark and ourselves, we wrote a grant to get AmeriCorps. There's only 25 AmeriCorps teams in all of the United States, and we got one of them from April 1st. We'll have them till the end of this month. They are 6 individuals that are fantastic to work with. I'm going to be very sad when they leave. They've learned a lot. We've done numerous pile burnings up on Dollar Mountain. We spent 3 days up there pile burning. We burned about 300 piles, so about 30 acres of cleanup along the trailhead, along the nuisance piles along the roads that were great. They learned how to do fuel mitigation, home assessments on property, how to reduce the fire risk on numerous homes. So we've worked all over the county, all over the city, and they've just been they've been a great experience for myself. And I hope they had a great time too. I'm going to have them come up and introduce themselves because I was explaining to them that it's going to be on YouTube so their family can watch this later on. So this is really important. So come on up and let's introduce yourself, where you're from and your name. That would be awesome.
Hi, my name is Anissa Adarich and I'm from New York.
Hello, my name is Anaí Peña and I'm from North Carolina.
Hi, my name's Adalia Moore and I'm from Michigan.
Hello, my name is P.D. Wojciechowski and I'm from Virginia.
Hi, I'm Alexander, I'm from Texas.
I am Avalon Lindsay and I'm from Arkansas.
Yeah, we just wanted to say thank you for having us. We've had a really fun time in Grants Pass. We also work at the Josephine County Food Bank on the farm there. We do a lot of weeding, harvesting, and the mobile food pantries. We go to Wolf Creek and Selma, and it's been really fun to live here and get to see everything that Grants Pass has to offer.
Yeah, this is our final round. We've been together since October, and we've traveled all across the country. Our first round, we served in Red Lodge, Montana, and then our second round, we served in Sacramento. So we've gone from building 2 houses to helping relocate Afghan refugees, and then now we're here working with your city, and we love it. And we honestly have been super excited to spend our last, round with these mountainous views. So thank you for having us here.
Wow, thank you for being here. That's it's neat to hear where you're all from. Obviously, quite a ways away from Southern Oregon here. So what a cool experience to get to tour the country and work and support our community. So thanks for everything you've done, and I hope you get to enjoy the sun a little and go rafting or on a jet boat ride or something like that while you're here too.
We went on Saturday.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah, we went on the Hell Boat excursion, Hellgate boat, yeah.
Perfect. We brought the sun out just for that. All right, thank you, and wave to your mom. All right. Well, we're going to go straight from that to budget. So full of fun stuff tonight, right?
Definitely a tough act to follow. Oh, let's see. Am I in the right spot? Oh, we got it. Perfect. Welcome, everybody, to the budget hearing adoption of supplemental budget for the fiscal year ending June 30th, 2022. So this is going to be a little dry. I apologize, but this is a public hearing, and so I'm going to go through some things and steps as to why we have to have a public hearing. So this modifies the current adopted budget to increase or decrease appropriations. This supplemental budget will allow the city to transfer the additional lodging tax proceeds received over and above the fiscal year 22 budget projections, and will also provide additional appropriations to garage operations division to account for rising fuel costs, and will allow the environmental waste fees fund to distribute all collections to the solid waste agency. And as part of the relationship to council goals, provide cooperative shared leadership involving council, staff, and community. So a supplemental budget can be used when something occurs that was not known during the regular budget process. As part of the requirements, we did do a public notice in the Courier on May 25th, as well as prepare a resolution that must state the need, purpose, and the amount. Can be adopted at a regular meeting if the change in the fund is less than 10%. However, tonight we have one fund that is over 10%, which is why the need for the public hearing. So with our lodging tax, their estimates were conservative due to COVID-19. The actual collections are over $1 million higher than budgeted. And there's a little bit of amounts that were available at the end of last fiscal year and not transferred as of 2021. There's a current adopted budget that will allow for the transfer of these funds to receive to the receiving departments. So the purpose is to increase the interfund transfers, basically send it from lodging tax into the other areas that are appropriate, so that all transit lodging revenues can be transferred, while also ensuring that each fund and budget transfers are in and out remain balanced. And again, here are the numbers, and you'll notice that the expenditures are going to be adjusted up a little bit. That is due to what Adam had also told you about, having to do increased number of audits because we have more transient lodging tax entities now. Here's your transfer detail, and this is kind of just a line by line as far as that summary of that little bit over $1 million. So all transfers out must be balanced by transfers in, sorry, accounting rules. Contract with the Destination Marketing Organization, or DMO, requires the city to pay 28% of available lodging taxes. All fund resources must equal requirements and balance their funds. Your increased appropriations to tourism promotion services will allow the general fund tourism division to make that payment to the DMO, as well as increased general fund ending balance will balance the general fund's resources and requirements. So there's a little bit of accounting in there. Here's what that specifically looks like in the general fund for your lodging taxes. You'll notice the DMO payment at the bottom and that increase due to the excess revenues. So in the LB capital, all transfers out must be balanced and transfers in, obviously, again. All fund resources must equal requirements. And so we're going to increase by about $117,000 for the transfers in, and then the capital outlay will be increased as well to balance the requirements. In our garage operations, obviously fuel costs have risen in the last few months that were obviously unexpected. We estimate that overage is going to be about $100,000, but we have some other savings in some other areas for $58,000. So Generally, to give us a kind of a cushion, we're moving about $70,000 of appropriation from contingency into the garage operations. And your environmental waste fees, additional revenues, we have to be paid to the Solid Waste Agency as it's a pass-through. So we expect it to only be about $88,000, but to give us enough room in case we do get any extra revenues, we're going to make that adjustment as far as $100,000, and then turn that money over appropriately. So Exhibit A in your packet is kind of a line by line of appropriations and what areas to hit. And it's also encompassing Resolution 217006, which was the adoption. And then if you remember, there was another supplemental budget done in August of 2021. And from that, here is the kind of summary of Exhibit A. So the cost implication, there really isn't a cost implication. There's nothing of frivolous spending or any additional project that we're trying to add in with the supplemental budget. It's more or less taking revenues and putting them where they need to go or pass through to agencies that they need to be paid to. So the call to action would be a motion to approve the resolution adopting a supplemental budget for the fiscal year ending June 30th, 2022. There are some alternatives. I would say we'd stay away from not passing this, as that would incur a financial black eye in the city of Grants Pass, but it is an option if you so choose. Is there any questions?
Thanks, JC. Any questions? Rick?
Thank you, JC. Could you go back to the slide that shows the distribution?
You're talking about lodging tax distribution?
Sure, that'd be fine. That's a good one.
This one?
Okay, so you, at the end, you indicated, and I'm in support of this, if the council goes ahead and approves this tonight, then the adjustments can be made. And you also indicated that when the distribution of funds, do they have to be done this calendar year or this fiscal year, or can those funds be held in abeyance for the future?
Well, we are supposed to turn over 28% to the DMO. And so whether we do it now or I come back in a couple of weeks and ask for another supplemental budget to ask for that appropriations to be given and or spent, you could do it that way, I guess. Doesn't necessarily make sense as
and I would want to do that. We would have the answer to my real question. With that additional adjustment, is the contract with the DMO designated how they're to use it, and there's no way we can hold that in reserve for another year because by the language it needs to be distributed this fiscal year?
By language, it's supposed to be distributed in this fiscal year, I believe, and it's 28% of all revenues collected. Now they, by, I believe, contract, are supposed to keep reserve amounts in their contract, as far as I remember reading. I could probably get you the exact figure of what that's supposed to be.
Okay, thank you. That answers my question. Thank you.
Val?
Yeah, I just have a question about the lands and building funds. I'm not exactly done with the transfer in. Whether that, not the landfill, the lands and building funds, it was in the summary.
This one right here?
Yeah, that one right there. So I was just kind of curious as to where, is that part of the tourism money that also is part of that original formula, that part of it goes to lands and buildings?
That is correct. And so this is their portion of the excess revenue that would go specifically to those LB projects.
And that is separate from police, parks, economic development. Is that the part that's going for like parks, facilities, or I guess I'm trying to figure out exactly what that part is.
Yes, that is correct. So this might show it easier. So that same 117,000, you can see the amounts in which they go. And so there's police, parks, economic development, and then the downtown, as well as the lands and building.
Okay, I didn't see it in the other one, so thank you. Okay.
Nope, it's a bunch of numbers, so it's hard to just read it off to people and not get people bored.
Okay, thank you.
Brian?
Thanks, JC.
And by the way, I love numbers, so you'll never bore me. So the land and buildings line is going up 117,000. How is that getting allocated in the land and buildings fund? Is that, where is it going in that fund? Is it going to the 0-0? Is it going to a specific project, or what's happening with that money?
I believe it has to go specifically to tourism building projects. Is that correct? Am I correct in that? Yeah. So it's not just going in a holding pattern for landings and buildings. It is a specific project that it has to go to.
Okay. What do we have? Do we know what specific project it's going to, or is that something we're going to discuss later?
I think it's going to the future park. It's for future park acquisition and facilities. So then from there, it maybe not going to, like, say, West Home Park playground equipment, but it's going to what it normally goes to, and then you can allocate it through future budget process.
Okay, so that's in addition, because there's a line up there that says parks also. So the lands and buildings, this adjustment is also going to parks, but it's in the land and buildings?
I believe it has to go towards tourism-specific types of lands and buildings, not just generic parks stuff, but I'd have to double check that.
Okay, so projects in land and buildings that qualify for, that would be considered something to do with tourism.
That is correct.
But we haven't yet decided what projects that money will go to?
No, but I believe in part the downtown, I'm not going to get it right. The new facade that we're putting on that building is part of the tourism economic development building. I forget what it's called.
The Welcome Center.
The Welcome Center, yes. So that, in theory, is one of those kinds of projects that are tourism related.
Okay, that'll work for now. And then we have the new budget approval coming here in a couple of weeks, right? Okay, great, thank you.
Vanessa.
Circling back to Councilor Riker's question, I understand we're contractually obligated to pay the DMO 28%. Are we contractually obligated to give them any unforeseen lodging tax dollar increases like what we're discussing this evening?
I believe it's 28% of all lodging tax receipts.
Oh, understood. Even above what is
Correct.
forecasted.
So if we budget $2 million and we get $3 million, they get 28% of the $3 million.
I understand. Thank you.
Yep.
Other questions? All right. This is a public hearing, so is there anyone from the public who wanted to speak on this issue? All right, we will close the public hearing and turn it over to council for discussion. Val.
Yeah, I realize this is just something, just like anything else that needs to happen. And of course, we all know the price of gas, and hopefully we can keep our lodging tax continuing to grow through this recession. But at this point, I'm going to move to approve the resolution to adopt the supplemental budget for fiscal year 2022.
Thank you. Second from Rick. Any discussion on the motion? Brian?
Yeah, at a later date, I'd just maybe like to circle back with Aaron about what those funds are going to be allocated to, since it wasn't totally clear. Thank you.
Okay, any further discussion? All right, Valerie made the motion to adopt the supplemental budget. And Valerie, how do you vote?
Yes.
Kurt?
Yes.
Vanessa?
Yes.
Rick?
Yes.
Brian?
Yes.
Joel?
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0. All right, we have several people from the audience here to speak tonight, so I was thinking we would jump forward to public comment instead of council action. Is that okay with everybody? All right. So for public comment, this is an opportunity for the public to address the City Council on items not related to a public hearing or council action item. The intent is to provide information that is pertinent to the city's jurisdiction. Each speaker will be given 3 minutes to address the council as one body, not to individuals. At the conclusion of public comment, council will have the opportunity to respond. This meeting will proceed in an effective and courteous manner. Citizens and council members will be allowed to state their positions in an atmosphere free from slander, threats, or other personal attacks. Signs or placards, outbursts of applause, campaigning for public office, or other disruptive behavior will not be tolerated. If you have a question regarding any government-provided service or a current city policy, please contact the city manager's office in an attempt to resolve the matter. And first up is David Dapper.
Hi, thanks. I'm David Dapper. I noticed in that budget a lot of money for parks. This money is going for parks that our families aren't safely able to use right now because the junkies that are just living random in there. I showed some of you pictures, and you can share my phone of what Tussin Park looks like. My wife won't even go down there. There's all night long, people are going back and forth for 5 minutes and running out. I showed you my camera system, and I'm sure they're not having 5-minute Bible studies at 2 and 3 in the morning. There's piles of garbage all over the place. Some of the homeless scream at you when you go down there. And they're not sleeping at night. They're partying at night. Last night we called the police and they went down there and poured out their alcohol. And is there any way we could put a fence across there, a gate across the parking lot, and shut it down at night from the nefarious stealings that go on at that time? And for these homeless, can we fence off an area somewhere where they can camp, not provided housing, but they can camp, and maybe have some pallet houses that they can rent if they want to work and rent those houses to cover the costs. And then they can get a job, they're stable, they can get a job and get a better place, just like all the rest of us did. I didn't buy Beverly Hills Palace for my first home, and none of us did. But that'll get them, a reward system, teach them a little capitalism, how to budget, how to feed themselves, and something's got to give, because it really is out of control. People won't even park in that parking lot because it's so scary. So they're parking back on the roads, and these are nice people that just don't want their stuff vandalized or ripped off, or God knows what would happen to their wife and kids. My wife breaks out in tears at the thought of going down there, or what's going to be coming across the fence at night. And we really need help. And this is the record of this going on. And the police need authority to do their jobs. They're not allowed to, they can't do anything without getting, in trouble. They're our protection. And we need them to have some authority, to have some rule of law in this society we live in now. Anyway, thank you.
Thanks, David. I forgot to tell people, when you have 3 minutes to speak, and when the yellow light goes off, you still have 30 seconds. So then there's a red light. Next up is Elliot Perkins.
Good afternoon, guys. I'm also here to talk about the homeless. He's absolutely correct. It's really gotten out of control. And I think we're being a little optimistic if we think that more services and more money spent from the city to provide services for these people who are not participating in the community. They're delinquents. They bring violence and harm to this city. I don't believe a single cent more should be paid towards them in helping them live this delinquent lifestyle. I would really like to see a homeless-free grants pass, not to control this rampant crime that we have going on in our parks. I want them out of this town completely, because in a society as nice as what we have in Grants Pass, they're not compatible with that. And I have a wife and children, and there's been several incidents where we feel fearful for our safety. And if we can't be safe, how are the tourists going to be safe? I notice we're spending a whole lot of money on tourism. Is that money well spent when the tourists can't even enjoy what the city truly has to offer in a safe way. I don't think we're investing our time or resources correctly when we're looking at this issue. I really think that these homeless, they don't belong in Grants Pass, and we do not have the services or the money to provide them with what they truly need, which is institutionalized care. Treat them in a humane way, but it's very difficult for families to constantly see everything that they work for, everything they pay for, to go out on the street and not feel safe because of people who aren't truly a part of this community. So I've heard a lot of ideas about homes and just giving them more things and more opportunities. I really have to say I don't believe that's a correct way to go around in looking at things, because these folks, they're not right. They are detached from reality. They're suffering from severe addiction. A lot of them have a long, lengthy criminal record. These are not the folks that I want my children around. They're not the folks that I want my wife around. It's truly a public safety, and it's having major, drastic impacts on the trajectory of the city. If we don't get it under control now, we will all live to regret it in a really big way. We can look north and we can look south at what happens when the policies being proposed here in these chambers are implemented. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Sydney.
Hi. Sorry, I'm a little nervous, so if I slip up a
Can
little
you
bit.
pull the mic down and tell us your name?
Hi, I'm Sydney Galligan. I'm the owner of Apple Preschool Academy, and kind of similar to what these gentlemen were talking about, I want to touch on that a little bit, along with law enforcement. Excuse my little one that's growling, she's eating. So we're located off F Street, and we're right on the train tracks. I'm sure, as you guys know, there's lots of people over there that we don't really want there. Our area has had increased trespassing activity over the last 6 months. We're right next door to Rada Paint, and just a couple weeks ago, somebody threw a rock through their window and attempted to steal their merchandise. And a couple months ago, somebody broke into our play yard of our school and damaged almost all of our outdoor equipment, along with stepping all over our flower beds. I know that sounds very minor, but it broke the students' hearts. They're 3, 4, or 5 years old, and they worked very hard on their flowers for some jerk to just stomp all over a bunch of petunias. As a business owner, it's very unsettling. I personally don't feel like my business is safe. I know that my neighbors at RADA don't feel like their businesses are safe. I have called the police department multiple times regarding issues of the transient activity around us. Every once in a while, we do have to have our door unlocked for parents to come in and out, of course, to get their kids. And those people will just come right on in and they'll just look around our school and we'll be like, are you kidding me? You obviously don't have a kid. Get out. Also to kind of touch on, what happened last week in Texas, I'm getting an increase in calls from parents at my school asking me what I'm doing to increase the protection of, to increase the protection of their children. And I've informed the parents that, I've called to see if the GPPD can do more frequent drive-bys. And yesterday when I was talking to an officer, they told me that the chances of that happening are slim because apparently positions are being cut. And I understand that there's a budget, but I personally don't think that, cutting our public safety would be the best, because he informed me that there's at most 5 to 6 officers at a time protecting all of Grants Pass, and he said that there's just no way that they can do more frequent drive-bys. And I want to make sure that, the children of our community are safe. So yeah.
Thank you. Next up, Rika Brown.
Rika Brown, Grants Pass. Before 2006, we had firemen going around town in May, telling people to cut their grass for fire season. We also called the fire department to complain about uncut properties. City Manager David Frazier and the council joined fire and police into public safety and stopped them from enforcing city codes. They gave that job to code enforcement, soon called community service, and they enforced codes thereafter only from citizen complaints. Manager Frazier taught community service not to enforce property maintenance codes until the nuisance was so bad that the city could abate it at 10% over cost. He was hired by a council of mostly builders and bankers. Over 2 elections, voters elected other small business owners who fired Frazier. Those 5 councilors were soon recalled by city staff and their friends, egged on by Mayor Murphy, who then appointed 5 councilors on his own non-existent authority. That council or the next hired Manager Kubik. When I complained that the 10% abatement fee rewarded the city for not enforcing codes sooner and was a conflict of interest, he raised the fee to 20% and continued to harvest health and safety hazards as they got ripe. This year, the city left 2 community service officer positions unfilled to help balance the budget. So there aren't enough CSOs to investigate all complaints. Noxious grasses and weeds, mostly with burrs and stickers, have taken over dry lawns and other neglected areas, and too many have not been cut as fire season begins. Manager Kubik said on KJO the other day that council sets the level of service, and we don't have enough police to police properties. Does this council want to save our city from wildfire and make this city more inviting? Now that we have again separated fire and police services, you need to give active enforcement of property nuisance codes back to the fire department. They have a strong incentive to do a good job at it, and they have enough time between fighting fires, which is why they used to do it in the first place. But to help people maintain their properties fire safe, we need to return our water rates to the rate system that for 50 years allowed everyone to fully water their yards. Thank you.
Thank you. Did council, did anybody want to respond to public comment today? Joel?
Well, I just want to say to the folks that were talking about the homeless situation, we had a workshop last week. It wasn't sponsored by the city. It was sponsored outside the city. And we're going to put it on the agenda if people want to hear it in terms of what the results were. It was aspects from all different parts of our community. And you're not alone. We're not going to get out of this by 1 person or 2 people or 3 people. We're going to get out of this because we work together. And we communicate and we listen to each other. So that's where it's at. And my microphone just went off, partly with good reason. Thank you.
Any other comment? Vanessa?
Yeah, you guys are not alone, definitely, in your concerns that you have with the homeless. This is by far the most frequent concern that we have from citizens, whether it's empathetic cries to do something or if it's voices of frustration. So I can't imagine that provides a lot of solace, but you're definitely not alone. Mr. Dapper, you described something that the council has been working on for some time. We are coining it the urban campground, and it is a designated facility for unhoused individuals to go. The idea is that it provides them a space outside of the parks, outside of the foothills, and it provides wraparound case management services to get them back on the continuum of permanent and stable housing. And Rika also, it's interesting history on the nuisance ordinance. I did learn something on that this evening, so thank you for sharing that as well.
All right. And I just wanted to reiterate, I know I've said this before, but the council is not choosing or inviting homeless people to camp in city parks. We are complying with a federal injunction. That's a court order that requires us to allow homeless individuals to sleep in the parks, and we are able to have them move along twice a week, and then they can come back later that same evening. So this is a situation where we're trying to work through it, but I don't want any confusion about the council inviting people or being really happy with this situation. It's definitely a frustration to all of us for different reasons. Emails, Karen.
So there was a letter that was emailed to council expressing frustration that Concerts in the Park is not at Riverside Park. And along with that, a request to keep council deliberations at meetings on track. And there was another email regarding budget committee meeting member attendance.
All right, thank you. Let's jump back to council action. We have a resolution to consider that would authorize the city manager to purchase playground equipment for West Home Park. And it looks like Brad is doing the presentation on that.
Yes. Good evening, Mayor, Council. So as you stated, I've got some information for you here on West Home Park. This is a project you heard about a couple of weeks ago on the drainage side, but we're going to talk about the playground side tonight. The relationship to your council goals really deals with both community safety through the quality of our playground equipment, as well as infrastructure to meet our recreation needs. If you're familiar with that park, in 1999, the older playground structure was erected. It served its job for many years, but it did deteriorate, came out of compliance, and we took it down in 2020. In April of 21, we received a $75,000 grant through Oregon Parks and Rec to support a new system, and the grant did include a reference to accessible tiles in the playground for fall surfacing. So we wanted to just point that out at the front end. We'll talk about that a little bit more in a minute. That grant is good through May of 2023. So we do have some time to spend the money and get the project done and report back, but we are a little behind where we told them we would be, but we're still in good shape in terms of the grant itself. As I mentioned on May 18th, we talked a little bit about the drainage system. That was a separate contract that you approved, and we're running that through all general fund money to improve the drainage area. We got 2 different bids from Playcraft Systems out of Merlin to secure this new playground equipment. They actually supply the majority of our playground equipment throughout the park system. One of their bids included rubber tiles, and another one had it replaced with wood chips, blown-in wood chips. There's a big difference between those two. $119,000 difference between the surface material there. So the one bid came in at $318,974. That's for all of the equipment, as well as all of the rubber tiles. And then the other one for blown-in chips, just under $200,000. The price increase for the rubber tiles primarily due to inflation, some supply chain, surprisingly enough, glue. That's one of the elements in this that really bumped up the price. So here's the park. At the bottom of the screen is Wildwood Avenue. Here's our tennis court. And then this area with the star is the playground area that we're talking about tonight. This is where the drainage is going to happen here in a couple of weeks. So it's a fairly good sized area. It's you know, a little over 100 feet long and you know, it's about, I think, 75 to 80 feet wide. Right now, it's just bare because we tore out the old playground equipment. This is a layout that shows the proposed site plan. We have a swing, a couple of merry-go-round type playground equipment, and then there's also the primary play structure that has the slides and jungle gym type features on it. And then here's an image of what we received from Playcraft for that main feature. So the surface tiles, there's a lot to be said for that, but that certainly is a recommended way, according to Playcraft and some others in the industry that I've talked to, including our new park superintendent who came from Corvallis, where they're moving towards these rubber tiles in a lot of their playgrounds as well. The ADA chips, and they call them ADA really just for the fall element, you know, of the accessibility. They're certainly not wheelchair accessible or anything like that. But under ADA, there is, you know, some areas that talk about the safety part of it in terms of preventing or helping to reduce the impact of a fall. This is what we have today in the majority of our parks. It is an acceptable material, and as I showed you earlier, a lot cheaper. However, since rubber tiles were identified in our grant, we staff think that we need to continue with those underneath the playground equipment itself. So that's what we're proposing tonight. One option for you to consider is considering the blow-in bark material, the chips, in some of the other areas that are not directly underneath some of the playground equipment. And we think that the state parks, they have indicated that would be acceptable. We don't have yet, unfortunately, a specific price reduction on what that would be if we divided it up and you know, the combination of the tiles and the chips. May 12th, the Parks Advisory Committee did talk about this subject, and they are recommending the rubber tiles to you. So the cost implications are here. Expense $318,974.02. That bid from Playcraft, we did confirm last week, is still valid, and they will honor that for another 30 days. There's the option to apply the wood chips that would reduce that number some. And then we have, in terms of the resources, the LB 6189, which is our primary parks maintenance fund, and then, as I mentioned, the $75,000 grant that also is there. Your main alternatives tonight: approve the resolution for the city manager to purchase the playground equipment at that full price. You could approve an amended resolution at a reduced amount, or decide not to purchase the equipment.
Thank you, Brad. Council, do you have questions? Brian?
Thanks, Brad. Did we get bids for the equipment from any other manufacturers or just Playcraft?
We only got formal bids from Playcraft. In part, you know, we're members of two different purchasing cooperatives, procurement cooperatives. They are members of that. We have historically used Playcraft. It's difficult to compete with, you know, the freight because they're so close in terms of the shipping.
Okay, but we didn't do any sort of advertising like we do in Daily Journal of Commerce or things like that? Or is that not appropriate for a expense like this?
Well, it's certainly appropriate. From our standpoint, there's that sole source clause in the procurement policy that as long as their company is listed in the procurement list of the company, KPCA, that would, kind of fall into that sole source, as well as they have competed in the past and always been low bid.
Okay, great. And then just one other quick question. Parks Advisory Committee made a motion recommending that City Council do the rubber tiles. And am I remembering correctly that they made that recommendation without the cost factor? They didn't have that information and.
Right.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Any other questions? All right. Is there anyone from the public who wanted to speak on this? Come on forward, Rika.
Rika Brown, 1415 Southwest Bridge Street, Grants Pass. I live about 3 blocks away from West Holm Park. And I have grandchildren now in my house, a little 2-year-old and 8 and 12-year-olds. And I'd really like to see that rubber tile all over that playground area. We have had chips in that park. They ended up full of weeds. And if you have mixed media here, tile here and chips there, in that rather small space, actually, you're going to have chips kicked up all over the rubber tiles, and they will lose a lot of their safety. Wood does splinter. And wood is not comfortable to fall on. And this neighborhood could use some love. There's an awful lot of this neighborhood, southwest area, that has no sidewalks. We have roads that have big potholes and are rather narrow between West Holm and Western. And it really could use some lifting up. It's kind of almost a slum. And there's, people don't tend to buy and sell there and build there, and so we got sections of sidewalk, but we don't have whole sidewalks on a lot of it. On one end of J Street, one block of J Street, we have grass and then sidewalk, both in front of the same property. Sidewalk down along the way, and then a long yard of grass at the end. And this has encouraged people to park across their little section of sidewalk because they don't figure anyone's using it, considering they have to go on and off it. So please, spend a little money in the southwest area on this park. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't see anyone else here to speak on this issue, so Council, let's turn it back over to you for discussion. Thoughts? Joel?
Well, I appreciate Rika's comments. I lived in the southwest also, about 2 blocks away from where you live. If I remember correctly, Riverside Park and All Sports Park have the wood, is that correct? And my grandkids who come down and visit, like this last weekend, play there, and we've had no issue with that. I could almost see the exact opposite with it, with the rubber tile and skinning your knee or whatever, especially with Henry. Henry, you know, you get one that always finds out what not to do. So anyway, I'm in favor of the mixed one, in spite of what Rika says, and I also respect her and her opinion.
Brian, then Val.
Thank you. I had a quick question. Have we ever had any sort of liability issue in any of our parks with regards to the wood chip surface? Has there ever been an issue in the city's history that staff is aware of? No? Okay. Thank you. Yeah, I would agree with Joel. I think, you know, we don't have unlimited money in our budget. You know, we need to be mindful. So if we can have kind of a mixed media floor and save a little money for future parks expenses, I think that would be good. And I also have to go to my daughter's choir concert, so y'all have a good night.
Val.
Yeah, I'm just going to say, and I'm very happy to have West Home Park taken care of, because that's been a long time coming, and I agree totally. But I also would like to save what money we can there, because the northeast part of town has not one playground. So there is not one playground in the city of Grants Pass in the northeast section. Any play equipment is at Lincoln Elementary School, and that has wood chips. And having taught there for 24 years, I don't remember there ever being an issue with the wood chips. So I would agree. And with that, I'm going to make the motion. Let's see here. Get this moving along. Approve an amended resolution authorizing the city manager to purchase the playground equipment at a reduced amount, which would include a combination of rubber tiles and ADA wood chips.
Okay. Vanessa with the second? That was what you wanted, was the combination of
Yes.
the rubber and wood?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. All right, discussion on that motion? Kurt?
Yeah, I'm going to agree with Rika. My grandson had a game there last year and went out to West Home, and it's one of those parks that's hidden away. You don't even know where it is until you get there. And I was really kind of saddened by the first impression I had at the park. And it's an older neighborhood that really could use something, and I think that the rubber tiles are something we should consider in the future at all of our parks. And I agree with Rika, this is an opportunity to kind of lift up that part of the neighborhood. And so I'm going to vote no unless we're doing all the rubber tiles.
All right, further discussion? All right, we still have 5 of you here. Okay, in that case, let's vote. So the motion was to purchase the playground equipment with a combination of rubber tiles and wood chips. And Valerie, how do you vote?
Yes.
Kurt?
No.
Vanessa?
Yes.
Rick?
Yes.
Joel?
Yes.
All right, motion passes 4-1. I'm just glad that the slide will be plastic, because I played at that park quite a lot as a kid, and it had one of those hot metal slides. All right. How about next up, resolution approving commercial activity in Riverside Park for the Fabulous 50s Charity Car Show.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. So this is a similar request to what you had at your last meeting. This is for commercial use in Riverside Park, and it's specifically for the Rogue Valley Fabulous 50s Charity Car Show. And the relationship to your council goal is encouraging economic opportunities through community events in our parks. So this is a nonprofit organization, the Rogue Valley Classic Cruisers. And they, as you know, have used it many times in the past. They are requesting use of Riverside Park to sell food and merchandise. They did submit a commercial activity in the park permit application to us. Other activities that they're proposing with this particular event are display of classic cars, music, and a trophy award presentation. The event's proposed for July 23rd from 10 to 5. And then I included, again, that municipal code citation there, which says commercial activity being prohibited in our parks unless the council provides the permission. So the call to action is today, although it wouldn't necessarily have to be since it is a month and a half away, but the earlier the better. So we put today's date on there, your alternatives to approve or not approve, and then the recommended motion there.
Thank you, Brad. Are there any questions? Rick?
Thank you, Brad. I know with all the different activities that are going on in the parks, some activities have decided to move to the fairgrounds. Was Back to the 50s one of those, or is they're still in the parks? Definitely.
Aaron may be able to answer that, but I think they're splitting that particular event. This car show, the charity car show, is still in Riverside here, but I think there might be a portion of it at the fairgrounds.
So a lot of people think Back to the 50s is just one big event, and it's actually 3 separate type events that are all put together on one weekend. The Rogue Valley Classic Cruisers do the Grasshopper Lot Show and Shine on Friday, and then they do the Show and Shine on Saturday at Riverside Park, and they're going to continue to do that. Then there's the fairgrounds aspect, who's taking on the concert in the evening and some activities out there at the fairgrounds on Saturday. And then the chamber is taking on the promotion of a cruise of some sort, also on 6th and 7th Street.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? All right. Is there anyone from the public who wanted to speak on this issue? All right. We will bring it back to you, council, for discussion. Vanessa?
I move to approve the resolution allowing commercial activity in Riverside Park for the Fabulous 50s Charity Car Show on July 23rd of 2022.
Thank you, and Rick had the second. Val with the third. Any discussion? All right. Vanessa made the motion to approve the resolution. How do you vote, Vanessa?
Yes.
Rick?
Yes.
Joel?
Yes.
Valerie?
Yes.
Kurt?
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0. Next up, we have a motion to update the Grants Pass Municipal Code, Chapter 9.12. It's the fire code. And it looks like Randy is doing the presentation.
Well, good evening, Mayor, Council, staff, and members of the public. Here to talk with you about fireworks. Remember last time I was here, we updated the municipal code. I actually want to thank you very much for making that addition of banning it on red flag days, because that is a very dire concern that I had. As we're moving forward tonight, and from the last meeting, what we are doing is bringing more information on predictive services, what we're potentially going to look like in July and August for fire season. And to kind of help you make a decision on, is there any additional moves that we'd like to make for fireworks on the 4th of July, or keep forward with the status quo. So when I look at wildland fire, and specifically I think when we're thinking about fireworks on the 4th of July, that's one of the biggest concerns we have. Especially in the last several years, we've tended to get hotter and drier, and we're seeing more active fire seasons. With that coming off of 2020, with Alameda, Obenchain, Slater Fire, we've got a large part of the community that is very apprehensive to wildland fire, and very good reason that they are. So for me, when I'm looking at it, and I get up in the morning and start saying, okay, what am I really concerned with today? These are just a couple of the things that I really focus on. And I want to go into them with you so you kind of understand. The very first one is RH. And RH is the humidity, the percentage of moisture that is in the air. That percentage of moisture in the air is really important to us. You know, when you go out east and you have 100% humidity, it's miserable, it's hot, you're covered in moisture, and that's exactly what it would be like if we had 100% here. Our fuels would be covered in moisture. We have a lot of light, flassy fuels, those light grasses, and that's really what carries a lot of our fire fast and quickly. Well, those fuels also react very quickly to the humidity in the air. So as the humidity goes up to 30%, those fuels also are running around 30%. Where I start to get concerned in the fire side is when they start getting below 25, and even between 20 and 25, there's still a little bit of moisture in there, but as they start to drop below 20 and down into the teens and towards the single digits, that's where we get that real explosive fire behavior. So looking forward to, 4th of July and kind of what to expect, that's one of the aspects I look at. The next one is wind. Wind is definitely what's going to push the wildfire in a specific direction. We've seen it down in California where we know that typically fire likes to run up slopes, but if we have a strong wind pushing fire down slopes, it's going to aggressively push the fire, and it's going to overcome that slope, and the fire is going to move downhill, sometimes as quick as what you would typically normally see it go up the hill. So, and when we're looking into red flag warnings, those are one of the things that you actually will commonly see is we have a red flag warning issued for this area because of low humidities and gusty to high winds. And so those are things that, we pay attention to. And then the last that concerns me is definitely the slope, the topography. We've got a lot of steep hills around us. We know that the fire can move quickly up those light grass fuels, up that brush with the slope and topography. So when we start talking about predictive services looks ahead to the future, and they utilize years past and based on where we're currently at in the drought and what they think is going to happen. And that's kind of where they say this is what our potential outlook is for the fire season. So this is actually off of May's data, but June's data came out today and it hasn't changed, so that makes it very simple. You can see here in June, Central Oregon, and if you've been watching the drought is actually still very extreme in that Central Oregon Deschutes County. Well, that area and down into Klamath Falls, which is also still in that high drought, is definitely going to be impacted. They also tend to get a little bit drier. Their humidities are lower just because of that high kind of deserty type atmosphere. And, they get some winds going through there. In fact, they've got gusty winds for the last several weeks and next several weeks when these storms come in. So they're expected to sometime here in June hit that level where they could potentially have have rapid fire growth more significantly than some of the normal areas. They are definitely at more risk. They're going to be more likely to see those red flag days a little bit sooner maybe than some of the rest of us. As we move into July for us in our area, you can see here now we have been added to that map. This doesn't mean that July 1st, that's going to start. This could be the end of June. It could be mid-July. It's going to really depend on what happens here coming after this next weekend. If you've been watching the weather forecast, you're probably very familiar that last weekend was kind of cool. We had some humidity and moisture come through. Next weekend, we're expecting the same thing. But after that, so far from what I've seen, seems to be our temperatures are going to start climbing and getting up into those normal upper to mid 80s, bounce back down into 70s. And what's going to be most important there is, do we get any moisture with it? If we get moisture with it, that moisture really makes a huge difference. And I'll show you another part of that here in a different graph coming up. But then we move into August, and August is going to be typical what it is for Oregon, especially for us here in August. We're light, flashy fuels. This is when we have our highest risk, our highest temperatures, and usually lowest humidities. So I showed you this last time. I just wanted to go over this again. This is what they call a pocket card. And this does some stuff. It lets us look at the seasons. And if you look at the pocket card on the top, that's basically your high and low based over 12 years worth of data. So you notice in there, if you look at July, and especially towards the beginning of July, if you go to the high mark, we definitely were up above that 50 percentile mark, which is where we start to definitely get a little concerned when we get up in that upper, lower orange and red. But we also had quite a bit that was down in that yellow, in that area there. Now, if you look down below, you can see Taylor Creek. Taylor Creek fire, everybody remembers it. It was here for a couple months, I think. Started off the lightning storm, and I think a couple of things to note that was significant about it. It happened, I don't know, around 6 or 7 days after 4th of July when we got that lightning storm. There were several fires that were in the valley. I mean, I think there was 160 across the 2 counties. Taylor Creek, the one that actually took off and ended up the large fire, was Taylor Creek number 3. So there were 2 other fires that were up in that area, and there were so many of those around here where we had fires 1, 2, and 3 up in the same areas, just because that lightning storm came through and just pounded our area. Well, if you look at the chart down below, notice how fast on the year of the Taylor Creek fire, how fast that goes straight up. So we just hit that perfect condition where it got really hot, got really dry, and it allowed for rapid fire growth. And that's what I mean by during the next several weeks going into July, we really don't know what's going to happen. We know Predictive Services says sometime in July we can expect to be in that red area. But if we get 2 or 3 more weeks worth of cool weather happening, every 7 to 8 days with some moisture, that's going to delay it quite a bit. And that's where you see on that chart down below, you see those dips. You can see it up high and then it dips down. That's almost always associated with some type of moisture that has come in during that time frame. So 4th of July, what do we currently allow and what do we do? So currently fireworks are allowed in the city from 6 to 11 p.m. on the 4th of July, except as listed below. We've got the area that is west of Northwest Highland and Dimick, which is north of the railroad tracks, the area north of Interstate 5, all city parks, any public school, and any other area that's designated by the fire marshal. And we do have some of those, and I'll show you that map here in a minute. And then also, just as a reminder, the sale of fireworks is not permitted at all within the city limits of Grants Pass anytime throughout the year. This is the map that I was talking about. So we have the areas that were in the municipal code originally, but what we recognized many years ago was then we have Panoramic, Havilland, all those areas that we've annexed since that point in time, since that original map was created, that also have a lot of urban wildland interface around them. And so those areas are also outlined as, from the fire marshal, that we're not permitted to use fireworks in there. So we've removed the firework use from any area that is buffering up against our urban interface zones. Firework concerns, and I think that again that most people here, and I think most people around the area, they fireworks, the dry grass and brush, and that's their biggest concern. For the 4th of July, from the hours from 6 to 11, if you talk to us in Oregon Department of Forestry and Rural Metro, we do get increased fires. But because of what I was mentioning earlier, that humidity that comes up, the temperatures go down, the humidity comes up, we're able to catch those fires rather quickly and they stay relatively small. Looking back over the past years to 2015, I think we've had a year where we had 3 fires, and that was a combination of grass, trash, and structure fire on one of those, up to where we had 9 calls. One of those we were canceled to. 6 of them were grass fires, and the other were a combination of just trash fires. And not all of those were related to actual fireworks fires. Since 2015, we've had 3 structure fires. One of those was actually at the fairgrounds during the fireworks show. The pump house that was out there was caught on fire because of some blackberry bushes, and it was due to fireworks as they lit them off. One of the debris came down and landed on there. Another one was a lawnmower that had been used and put away in the garage and had there was nothing in relation to any firework use. And then the third one they're believed to be was actual fireworks down on Short Street, and the people probably remember that a few years ago in 2019, a relatively visible fire that night. But then again in 2019 was a fairly slow year. I think it's one of them that we only had the 3 calls for fires during 4th of July. So any 4th of July is kind of different. I think I've worked about 22 of 4th of July since I've been here. And I've had everything from nights where I thought we were going to be super busy to nights where Friday night in particular years ago, everybody went camping. The town was super quiet and there was like no one around. And it was one of those things that just kind of surprised you. And that was our best guess because it didn't fit the year before where, Thursday night was fairly busy. So every 4th of July can be a little different. What I do worry about is a structure fire. Okay, we have fireworks going around through our community, and we are definitely more at risk for structure fires, whether it's fireworks landing into the brush and spreading to a structure fire, and my biggest concern is the people that just don't put the fireworks in the water, they don't get them soaked, they put them in their garbage, they put that garbage up next to their house, and then at 2 or 3 in the morning when they're asleep, that starts on fire, spreads into their house. And that concerns me a lot more because now I've got an occupied house with people in it that's on fire, and I'm hoping that their smoke detectors work. It's exterior fire, so it's going to take time to get smoke, smoke inside to even set them off. So I actually have a lot more concern on that. The other thing is, we don't have a lot of resources. So a structure fire is pretty much going to wipe us complete of what resources we do have on and available. And that's even in addition to, we bring back and staff 2 brush trucks to patrol those urban interface areas because we want to make sure that we don't have people up there using fireworks. But a structure fire is going to bring most of that in, and some of our mutual aid partners. So there is an impact on our ability if we get a second or third fire at that point in time. Now we are resource deficient, and it definitely can have an impact on whether we can able to get there and stop it. I'm not going to go into them, but I know the other issues that we have out there are injuries. I'm not aware of a local injury, but I know nationally there is a lot of fireworks associated injuries every year and even some deaths. PTSD. We know that there's a lot of associated issues there with mental health, and especially our veterans that have come back from wars and those loud sounds, the booms and the flashing lights. And then of course the animals. And so those are other concerns for you to think about as you're looking at the decisions. Our plan on 4th of July, so our response model, what do? First of all, we really try hard to maintain our units in their district. We want our primary engines that are covering our districts to stay in our districts. And then we, as I mentioned earlier, I have the brush units, they're up in the urban interface. They're the ones really making sure that there's nobody up there not following the rules, and that we're making sure if they are using fireworks illegally, that we're stopping them and letting them know the rules, forwarding them to the fire marshal and so on. If we have fireworks display, we do have to have an engine on standby there. That's just kind of part of the agreement in order to have a fireworks display, no different than Boatnik. We had an engine down there for both nights for that. And then last but not least, and something that's really important to me, positive community engagement. Currently we have a lot of folks who go out there and they've got the hose, they've got the bucket of water, they're using legal fireworks, and I've been really focused on making sure our folks are taking time to really reinforce and thank them for following the rules, being safe, and setting a good role model for that, and just making those positive contacts. Difficulties. So things that we run into, and this is whether we have a band or currently as we exist, because we get a lot of complaints every year for illegal fireworks that already are not allowed in the state of Oregon. Some of our difficulties is we've got 2 prevention personnel, and those are the ones that can actually cite the municipal code. So if fireworks were illegal within the city, they could actually go out there and cite that. They can cite people up in the urban interface area, since those are banned. But the one thing they can't do is they can't go and cite off of state law. So they're not police officers, and so all the illegal areas, they actually have no enforcement on. So who enforces that? Well, the only ones that can enforce that are our police department. And as we talked before with Chief Hensman, 4th of July is a very busy night for our law enforcement. There's a lot of things going on. There's a lot of alcohol. There's a lot of domestic fights, all kinds of issues, in addition to the illegal fireworks. His priorities and where he sends his resources and officers are going to be based upon the risk and level, and being able to enforce fireworks or illegal fireworks is going to be difficult to almost impossible for local police to do that. And then last but not least, disposal. For many years, we confiscated illegal fireworks. That was just something that we thought we could do. I think it was one of those things that have been done generation from generation. There is actually no law in the state of Oregon that allows the fire department to confiscate illegal fireworks. I have no legal right to possess an illegal firework any more than anybody else from the public does. The only ones that could actually do that would actually be law enforcement. We also used to be able to give them over to Oregon State Police, and their bomb disposal unit would take care of that. About 2 to 3 years ago, they stopped accepting those. So that means then we're having to try to figure out how to actually take care of those. Well, moving forward, one, I don't have the right to legally have those, and we don't have a disposal method anyway, so it's just something that we're not going to be able to do, which just complicates things even more. Fireworks calls for the 4th of July, and just history in the last 2 years, and especially we're talking about those illegals. Those 89 firework complaints and 74 on there, I am guessing almost all of those are probably illegal aerial complaints that neighbors call in on. What we typically find is that, you know, a lot of people, and more, and that's up from, I think, when I was here last time in 2019, we had around 40 something. So it was a significant increase to 2020. That was actually nationally, injuries doubled and deaths doubled in 2020. Probably a lot to do with COVID and people not being out and about and being more at home. So I think that, you know, we saw a little bit of that, but the reality is, before, when we had 40, we tried to get a unit going by there all the time just to make sure that someone was in the area. When we start getting into 74 and 89 firework complaints, that's outside of our ability to even try to get units there, in addition to manage the other calls that are going on, because it's not just fireworks. I've had people hit by cars, we've still got cardiac events going on. We still have the normal 911 operation that happens. These are all in addition to that. So this kind of gives you an idea of what the last 2 years were, and then again that, you know, most of those are going to be already illegal aerials. State of Oregon laws. A lot of people get confused by this, but fireworks may be sold in Oregon between June 23rd and July 6th. Local municipalities and counties can actually adjust that and range in that for different time frames. Oregon actually has no regulation on when you can use fireworks. That is left completely up to the municipality. So here in the city, we can only use them from 6 to 11. In the county, there is nothing regarding use of fireworks that regulates them. There is some stuff with Oregon Department of Forestry and fire season that comes into impact, but then it also has to do in relation to protected lands and distances and things like that. So there's actually, a lot of people feel that 4th of July is the only time allowed, and it's actually not true. There's a lot more opportunity to utilize fireworks. And fireworks used in Oregon must be purchased in Oregon. So firework concerns, and again, you know, they pose an increased risk of injury and property loss. So that's the one thing that you're looking at is we have, you know, from past practice and what we've seen, we have a relatively low risk on the 4th of July during our hours, but I cannot tell you that there is no risk. There is definitely increased concern for injury, and we have an increased concern for property loss. And as mentioned earlier, structure fires is actually one of my biggest concerns and I worry about. The sales of fireworks allow for them to be utilized on days other than the 4th of July. I believe that we've actually met with the commissioners and had talked with them about sale of fireworks in the county. And I think one of the things that people are focusing on is really on the 4th of July and why, you know, we're using them on the 4th of July. If you talk to, you know, myself, and I've talked with ODF, and I even got their data recently, so 35% of the firework-related fires happens for them on the 4th of July. And again, the same thing as us. They're upstaffed, it's humidity's going up, and they're keeping them small. We actually all kind of agree that if you're going to look at the firework issue, we need to ban the sales of firework, not because I'm worried about it so much on the 4th of July, but because I'm very worried about it on August 10th at 2 in the afternoon. That is where our biggest concern comes in. And that's where I think Oregon as a whole moving forward needs to look at doing some changes because of the type of area we live in. And it seems to be our climate is getting drier and drier. You know, I think that, and I've heard some mention before of New Year's Eve, if you're going to utilize fireworks, make it on the coldest, wettest time of year, not at the start of our driest time of year, and definitely not selling them at the driest time of year so that people can have them to utilize in the rest of July, August, and September. So, call to action, really this is an option choice for council discretion on what you would like to do. The permanent ban on the use of fireworks in the city of Grants Pass, and again, like I said earlier, you definitely, by allowing fireworks in the city, we have an increased risk of fires. There's no way around it. It's very minimal from what we've seen over the years, but it still is an increased risk, and I do have a concern for structure fires. Ban the use of fireworks this year. We have the predictive services. We know if we were to start in the 80 and upper 80 degrees days for the rest of the month, all of this grass that's out there that we're seeing on our hill that, you know, last year was this tall because it cured much earlier and is now this tall, can be very flammable and be very ignitable by fireworks. And or the other option is make no change, and of course any other option at council's discretion. Questions?
Thanks, Randy. Questions? Vanessa?
Before I get into my question, to touch on the commissioner meeting, you are right. They made some really interesting points in speaking the language of understanding the extreme fire danger, but ultimately chose to make no action on banning the sale. So I would like to see them ban the sale of fireworks in the county. To get to my question, for grass fires that have happened in the last month or two, or just any vegetation fire, can you talk about how fuels are currently burning?
Currently, the fuels are actually not burning very well. They're fairly wet. They've got a lot of humidity in them. We're getting a little bit of spread from, like they had a structure fire today out in Camp Joy. That's going to be an area that last year we could have probably got a quarter to half acre off of a fire like that in this type of condition. Today it was very minimal. I own property outside the city limits, and you know my fuels aren't cured, and that's really what you're looking for. Well, it's green at this moment in time. That means it's got all that moisture in there, and it's still going to provide that buffer and slow that fire down. And the fire is only going to be burning the dead material. But as soon as the grass turns brown, and I was driving I-5 the other day, we're starting to see some in between the two roads, because that's one of the areas that start to go first. And then it's going to be your south and west facing slopes. Those will be the next ones, and you see them on our hills here. When you drive down to Medford, you look on one side's brown, the other side's green. That's has to do a lot with the aspect, the way that it faces and how much sunlight it gets every day. So, you know, right now, it's working in our favor for us to be able to catch it, but like I said, we get 2 or 3 weeks of 80-degree days, that grass will all be cured, and it's a lot higher because it's got a lot of time to grow this year.
Thank you. Did have an additional question. For the fire danger levels in the city of Grants Pass, how is that determined? Is it determined on predictive services as well? I know we just entered the low stage.
So we just follow ODF. So as they adjust their level, we adjust ours. We've got a few differences in restrictions between the two. You know, for example, we do not allow any outside fires, campfires per se, once we start fire season. In ODF protected lands outside the city limits, you still can while they're in level green. Once they go out of green to blue, then that will cut all of that off. So there's slight differences, but it's too confusing if we try to do a different system than them.
Thank you.
Joel?
Randy, this is probably an unfair question. I don't expect you to know the answer. What is 1,000-hour fuel moisture?
The 1,000-hour fuel moisture is roughly around 27%.
27%. Do you know when it's projected to go below 20%?
I don't.
Okay. How about the green fuel moisture of the overstory?
I don't have the green fuel moisture. We just got the 1,000-hour updated the other day.
Okay. Just for reference, what was the burning index today? Do you know?
I don't.
Don't?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
So just to kind of clarify, in 1,000-hour fuel moistures, 1,000-hour fuel moistures are very large size material. It's things that's going to take 1,000 hours to change the percentage of fuel moisture in it, and that's why they call it 1,000-hour fuel moisture. That's actually what shows that we're still in pretty significant drought conditions. If we weren't in drought, you should be seeing that at much higher levels. So those things are already down at you know, pretty critical levels for moisture, and we're in June.
Rick?
Thank you, Randy. Refresh my memory, didn't we, the council have a discussion on red flag, and that would prohibit, if red flag has been declared, that would prohibit the use of fireworks? And the second part of that, who declares, who names or sets red flag in motion?
Okay. Yeah, so the council actually, we amended the ordinance so that if it's a red flag day, the fireworks are banned during that time. And the reason, you know, I'm kind of talking to you about this is there were some of the counselors that actually wanted more information, look at more options, but also look at the predictive services, what we were expected to be in July to help make a better decision. The National Fire Weather Service, they're the ones that actually do the red flag warning for us. So it's a fire weather-based system, so they're looking ahead and they'll let us know usually 2-3 days in advance if we're lucky. And they're going to say, as I mentioned earlier, on July 4th, you are predicted to have gusting winds and low relative humidities. So, and there's several other reasons that they could do it. They could do it for lightning storms coming through, abundant lightning on dry fuels, lightning with little to no rainfall. There's, you know, several other options that will trigger a red flag warning.
Thank you.
Valerie?
That pretty much answered my question, because that's what I was going to ask about, is how far in advance would we get that red flag warning to notify that it was not allowed because of the conditions?
Yeah, it's definitely a short time frame of 2 to 3 days. We will sometimes have an idea, you know, like if thunderstorms are predicted, we might know of those 5 to 7 days ahead of an idea, but that can change a lot in 5 to 7 days. So really until it gets to those close days. And then, you know, if we did have a red flag day, we would utilize social media, we would utilize media and every avenue that we could to educate the community that it's a red flag day and fireworks are banned. I don't think there's a way that we would get everybody, but I think that it would significantly reduce the folks out there using them.
Rick?
So Randy, when they declare a red flag day, do they have to do it day by day? Example, for instance, on the 10th of June, if it's determined that there's 10% humidity, that would be a point which they would be concerned with 10%?
Yeah.
And if your fuels are in a danger limit, then they would declare that day a red flag day, but would that, just like when the Forest Service sets whether you're high, low, or extreme, does that stay in effect until it changes, or they have to go day by day?
They'll actually usually come out and say, on July 10th, you have a red flag warning from 10 a.m. till 1 a.m. on July 11th for gusty winds and low relative humidities. So it'll be a time frame based on what they're forecasting, how long it lasts.
And if the forecast is for 2 weeks, they could set it for 2 weeks?
I've never seen a red flag warning that long just because it changes so much over time. So usually 2 to 3 days out. I've seen where they've had us posted for a couple days, but even then they'll come in and, you know, red flag warning has been canceled. We've, you know, updated it. We've now lifted it, and so you're no longer under that.
Okay, thank you.
They also, just as awareness, they usually issue the red flag information or the weather information that we're following early in the morning and then again early in the afternoon. And that's where we could, let's say tomorrow we were red flagged from 10 a.m. till 7 p.m. That may have been what it said this morning. This afternoon I could go in there and it could be 10 a.m. till the next day. It could be canceled. So they do update it quite a bit.
Any other questions? Vanessa?
Circling back to the predictive services map for June of 2022, you mentioned that Central Oregon and generally east of the Cascades, that they are likely to see more red flag warnings. And you also talked about resources and staffing. Can you talk a little bit about if there was a large event happening east of the Cascades, what would happen to statewide resources if we needed assistance here later on in the summer?
So there's actually a lot going on in that arena across the state. As some people may or may not be aware, Oregon State Fire Marshal's office has pulled out of Oregon State Police. So they've kind of been separating and building their own agency as themselves. And we have actually now got a coordinator that will help us with resources. What will typically happen in years past, and things are changing quite a bit, but in years past, they would actually call out and say, hey, we've got a conflagration fire, we've got X amount of houses threatened, and then Oregon State Fire Marshal's office will then put out the call to the Fire Defense Board chiefs. This is what we need, this is what we're looking for. Typically, here in Southern Oregon, we're not necessarily a go-to resource. we're considered more of user counties because we're actually in one of the worst areas for fire. Also, typically, when they start pulling those resource orders, they oftentimes look towards larger municipalities that don't have as much urban interface or wildland. So you'll see task force from Clackamas, Portland, Tualatin Valley, those type of agencies putting those together and sending them on the road. As the fire season increases, back in 2020, I want to say at one time, I think the state, we had up to 16 or 17 task forces that you could typically ask for, and we had 26 active task forces deployed. So we were beyond what our capacity was, which meant a lot of agencies, including our own, we had makeup task forces that didn't normally exist that were out helping some of these fires. We were getting units from Lakeview that typically don't normally send units out. And so as the fire season gets worse, we just start reaching out more and asking for more help from the agencies. Once we go beyond that, then we're looking at bringing in outside resources from California, Washington, through the agreements that they have at the state level.
Thank you.
I have a question regarding ODF protected not fire lands, just lands.
Yeah.
ODF protected lands. It's my understanding that fireworks are always illegal in ODF protected lands. Do you know anything about that, or shall I talk to ODF?
So I think I'll give you my general knowledge of it, but there definitely is more information from ODF. So when you look at the wording, there is fireworks are prohibited. If it's their protected land, so like BLM, public lands that they're managing, it's definitely prohibited out there once they're at a certain level of fire season. I'd even have to verify that. But your house, if you own your house and it's your property and you're protected by ODF and you're outside the city limits, that doesn't mean that you're restricted. So the ODF protected, it definitely goes to what they're doing. And then there's some other language in there, and that's where you'd have to clarify a little bit more, has to do with relationship to what's considered forestry lands. And then they have just gone through and in the process of releasing a major update to what lands are looked at through the state of Oregon. They hadn't reviewed the land classifications for years. And so as this new classification system's coming out, I don't know what impact that's going to have as far as that distance. That could actually restrict some other folks from fireworks.
Okay, yeah, I pulled up a sampling on the tax assessor map the other day of properties just outside city limits, and they were paying an ODF protection fee.
Yes.
But it's your understanding that they wouldn't necessarily fall under the fireworks prohibition?
Yep, there's ODF protected lands, and then there's ODF protected lands. And I think that that's what it really boils down to is that, you know, there's a public lands that they do protect, and there's a large amount because they cover BLM, their lands. They also do quite a bit of private timber, but then there's also private lands that people own that are protected by ODF, which is in a little bit different category.
Okay. Any other questions? All right, we will turn this over to the public. Any public comment?
Rika Brown, 1415 Southwest Bridge Street. That was a wonderful presentation. And I was impressed with the amount of detail he went into with moisture being the main factor in fire. And we have control over that. We can make this city moist again. For most of 50 years, we were well protected from fire because we watered our city. And that keeps the moisture in the air through the summer because everybody's watering. And the ground holds moisture, and the trees transpire it. And the whole town was protected like a bubble. We didn't have big old forest fires 5 miles away like we did in 19, or was it 18? Anyway, when the Taylor Creek fire, which I had to provide shelter to my daughter and her partner, because they were living out there in the Taylor Creek area. We didn't see fires except way out there in the wilderness, really big fires. And we can be that way again. We just have to reform our water rates and make those units as cheap as they can be, so we can all use them for every beneficial purpose. Thank you.
All right, Council, I will turn it back over to you for discussion. Vanessa?
Been pretty consistent on my stance in the allowance of using fireworks in the city of Grants Pass. I would like to see an all-out prohibition. To remind the council and the community, we are currently, Josephine County is split half and half in a moderate and severe drought as we approach summer. That's only slated to get worse. The U.S. Forest Service has done a risk assessment for houses that are most vulnerable to wildfire. In the community that I represent, the Redwood area is number 2 out of 50 communities in Oregon. Grants Pass is number 8. So 2 of our community, our whole community, and one of our subsets have made the top 10. I think that's worth considering. The Oregon State Fire Marshal released data that between 2014 and 2019, there were over 1,100 firework-related fires in Oregon, resulting in millions of dollars in property loss. We know that fireworks are most commonly used around homes. As Randy had said, there are a lot of concerns about people, not necessarily the ignition point of them, but the aftercare of them. So I would hope that the council, considering all factors, would agree that the prohibition of firework usage at all in Grants Pass should be moved forward this evening. Thank you.
Rick?
Well, I see fireworks as a tradition of our country, and with the red flag provision that's out there to protect us, I guess I'm comfortable with that level, that if the fire danger is out there, fireworks will be prohibited under the red flag. So I would be leaning that way. Thank you.
Val?
Yeah, I don't think a ban will do anything to prevent those people who want to do their fireworks. It might prevent the people who, I have a lot of neighbors in my neighborhood who have small little neighborhood gatherings, and it's usually they get out their chair, they've got their children, they've got their hoses. I don't want to take that away from them. I think that if we were to do a ban, it would just cause more havoc. Right now we have a ban on aerials, and aerials go off whether we want them to go off or not. And so I think it would overburden our police department at this point in time. So I am happy. I'm very satisfied with a red flag warning. I think people will respect that if they know that there's a reason not to have fireworks because of the conditions. I think they will respect that. I think if you just say, no, you can't have them, then you'll just have more people do them anyway. So I'm in favor of keeping the red flag warning and making a decision based on that.
Any other discussion? Joel?
Well, I certainly understand what Vanessa said, and I think Berlin's #1 in the state. Isn't that correct, Vanessa? Yeah. So there is a big potential out there. And this is off subject, but everyone needs to clean out their gutters and clean out away from their houses and make them fireproof. That's a big part too. The one thing that I feel comfortable with the red flag thing, the one thing that bothers me is if we have a law, I'd like to be able to enforce it. And like with the aerial ones right now, we don't enforce that. I'm sure some people get excited, but geez, I go to bed at night and my dog's shaking in the bathroom, from the aerials, and especially those big ones that go boom. And so we got to figure that out. The other thing we got to do is go in concert with the county. And when Sarah and I met with the county commissioners, that's where the fireworks are being sold, is right outside city limits. And they had no interest in that. So we're going to have people selling fireworks on Redwood Avenue and Merlin and other places, regardless of what we do. So I feel comfortable with where we're at. I'm not sure that, but before we move ahead, I'd like to be able to enforce what we would do with the man on fireworks, and I would like to have the county go with us. Right now, I don't think we can do either one. And so I certainly understand what Vanessa said, and I'll be voting with what Rick said for the reasons stated. And it's not about fire danger, because we are in a prolonged drought and we're below our 1,000-hour fuels where we should be. And our burning index is going to go up, and but if we get a red flag warning, we will we'll ban it. And we got the critical areas, the rural-urban interface areas already covered, which I feel comfortable with as long as we enforce that. And it looks like with those engines, we're going to do that. So that's not just fireworks, it's campfires, where we've had several fires in the past year. So.
Kurt?
Just to kind of restate what I've said before, I mean, I've been in favor of a full ban, but I think unless the county is going to do the same, all we're doing is encouraging our citizenry to, which are normally good law-abiding citizens, to be tempted not to be, and that's going to create unnecessary conflict with our public service people, or public safety. So I do see probably an opportunity here. There's a lot of big shopping parking lots. Maybe somebody could create some fireworks safe spaces. People could show up and shoot off their fireworks. They could have some food trucks and make it a whole party. So Walmart, if you're listening, I'm just a suggestion. So we did just make this red flag warning element to our ordinance earlier this year, and we haven't even tested it out, so I guess I would be in favor of staying with what we got.
All right, Val?
So we do nothing, because that is what we currently have on it. So there will not be any sort of motion that's needed to keep it just as we're at. So I just wanted to clarify.
That's what it sounds like, yep. Vanessa?
On the contrary, I would like a public vote on this. So I move to approve the motion amending Chapter 9.12.270, prohibition of fireworks at all times.
Is there a second?
And as a reminder, any counselor can second the motion, not necessarily in support of it, but just so that we can have a vote.
Kurt seconded it. All right, any discussion on that? All right, so the motion would ban fireworks at all times. And Vanessa, you made the motion. How do you vote?
Yes.
Rick?
No.
Joel?
Valerie? No.
Val?
No.
Kurt?
With the concerns I said, I'm just going to say yes.
All right. Motion fails 3-2. Any further discussion on this topic? Okay, we will move on to our appointment. We have a vacancy on the Central Business District Vitalization Task Force, previously known as the Caveman Plaza Task Force. There is one opening on the task force, and the qualifications for this position, it could be a downtown business owner, a banking or lending professional, real estate development professional, tourism, historic preservation, or just diverse citizen perspectives. We have 3 candidates who have applied. They are Michael Holtzinger, Dat Lom, and Doug Walker. And the task force has recommended Michael Holtzinger, who has been involved in the Committee on Public Art. All that said, councilors, if you would please circle or note the candidate that you prefer to nominate, write your name on the hot pink form and pass it down this way. All right, we have 3 people. Oh, I failed to read, I guess earlier that it also says that Michael Holtzinger is currently on the Urban Tree Advisory Committee as well as the Committee on Public Art. And Doug Walker's on the Housing Advisory Committee. That said, we have 3 nods for Michael Holtzinger coming from Rick, Valerie, and Joel. And 1 for Dat Lom, that's from Kurt Collins, and 1 for Doug Walker coming from Vanessa. Did anybody want to talk about that? Go ahead, Val.
I'm just going to make a motion to appoint Michael Holzinger to the, what is it called? Central Business District Vitalization Task Force.
Is there a second from Vanessa? Rick, you wanted to talk? Go ahead.
I really appreciated reading over the list of the people that wanted to volunteer, and I think there are some very capable people. And in some respects, I would like to, if we had the opportunity to appoint all 3. I do sometimes get concerned when people are on more than one committee that we should give the opportunity to somebody else. But also, I think the overriding factor for me was on that committee, it's having local experience, having lived here for a while is important, and to have that input. And that was the basis for my decision. Thank you.
Anyone else wanting to talk? Okay. Valerie made the motion to appoint Michael Holtzinger. How do you vote, Val?
Yes.
Kurt?
Yes.
Vanessa?
Yes.
Rick?
Yes.
Joel?
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0. All right. Next up, we have the consent agenda, which are items of such routine nature or without controversy that they may be approved with a single action. And we have a brief presentation on the quarterly financial report. Was there anything else anybody had questions about or wanted to remove from consent? Which one, Vanessa?
I did have a question on page 61, the city county insurance services property, general liability automobile pool.
Okay. Did you want to pull that one from consent?
I just had a quick question. I don't know if it needs to be pulled. I just had a
Okay. We'll have your question after JC does the presentation on the financial report.
All right, I'm back with more numbers here. Hopefully I can make this somewhat entertaining. So you'll have to maybe give me some direction afterwards. I'm going to do this maybe a little different than Adam might have. I like to use pictures and charts to kind of illustrate what the numbers are saying, at least to me. And so as far as looking at the general fund revenues, this is a side-by-side for Q3 over the last 4 years. And as you can see, our revenues are a little down, and I'll go through that here in a couple of slides. Here are our property taxes over the last 4 years. As you can see, we may be leveling off. Is that maybe something of things to come? Is building and or is the economy slowing down potentially. So property taxes are the largest source of general fund revenue. The assessed values, as previously reported, were up to 3.19, which is 1.6 from existing properties and 1.59 from new construction, which is a little lower than projected. However, we do feel that we are still going to come about $200,000 over budget, so there's no warning there. The building division was budgeted conservatively due to COVID, but it is slightly lower than projections and budget. Typically, building divisions are the canary in the coal mine, so is that potentially a slowing of building and or the economy as well? We have some interfundal government grants, so you kind of saw that little dip between 21 to 22. We had a large FEMA receipt that was about $227,000. That makes it look like it's higher. We are getting lower marijuana tax receipts due to Measure 110 kind of coming into full process, I guess. We have some lower liquor tax receipts in those numbers. One is due to timing, and that's about $50,000. The miscellaneous revenue is relatively a small portion, and you can obviously see that interest income is low due to market conditions. And here's a look at a side-by-side of our general fund expenditures. As you can see, it's pretty flat in comparison from year to year. And this is probably what everybody wants to know is where's public safety at? And it's a hot topic right now. As you can see, it's gone down between 21 and 22. Fire is about $87,000 less due to the staffing cuts, as well as maybe some tighter restrictions on spending. Police is down about $365,000 due to staffing and vacancies, as well as $165,000 in support. So all divisions are anticipated to return more than the average 6% savings that we talk about. The tourism division is actually higher as far as expenditures due to the DMO and the TLT increase. And then our personnel costs are the greatest costs in this fund, and vacancies provide those savings. And then this is probably a visual of what we're talking about when we're talking about transient lodging tax in comparison to the previous years, especially through the COVID-19 era. So all other funds are within normal levels. Obviously, lodging tax is way above budgeted. All other expenditures within reasonable levels, except for obviously the things I presented earlier regarding the supplemental budget items. Capital projects ebbs and flows based on when we're actually spending, and so we actually have full appropriation, but that doesn't necessarily mean that we spend it all in any one given year. Pretty short. Are there any questions that you have about the Q3 financials?
Any questions? Nope. Thank you. All right. Good presentation there. Vanessa, you had a quick question about item B on the consent agenda.
Yeah, I did see that there is optional excess possibilities for coverage. A couple of them being earthquake and flood. I wanted to ask, is it possible to have optional excess fire coverage as well?
No, we don't have that option.
Thank you.
Yep.
Anything further? All right. Joel, would you please read the consent agenda?
Item A, resolution authorizing the city manager to enter into a contract for the Baker Park parking lot reconstruction project. Item B, resolution continuing membership in the city county insurance services, property general liability, and automobile pool. C, resolution authorizing the city manager to enter into agreement with Southern Oregon Aspire for parks janitorial services. Item D, motion acknowledging the receipt of the monthly and quarterly financial reports for the quarter ended March 2022. E, F, G, and H are motions approving the minutes of the City Council meeting, May 18th, the Parks Advisory Committee meeting of March 10th, the Urban Area Planning Commission meeting of April 3rd, and the Urban Area Planning Commission meeting of April 27th. And with that, I make a motion to accept the consent agenda.
Second from Val, thank you. And Joel, how do you vote on the consent agenda?
Yes.
Valerie?
Yes.
Kurt?
Yes.
Vanessa?
Yes.
Rick?
Yes.
Passes 5-0. Matters from mayor and council. I wanted to start us off with, I guess, a lot of discussion. You know, obviously we've had a lot of complaints about the parks and concerns from citizens, and people are wanting to know how we were able to clear the park for Boatnik when we can't normally. So I asked the city manager to help me explain how that happened.
Well, we do have a special agreement that council has ratified that provides the active club a non-exclusive use of the park and for a designated time each year for that Memorial Weekend. And what the city does is the city then does not have it open for public use. We don't schedule things. It is really an agreement for the active club to utilize both Riverside Park and Baker Park for Boatnik event. So they have this ability and use to basically have the park for those about 4 days.
And then there's been some concerns that we paid the homeless to move out of the park for the week. Did we pay the homeless to move out of the park for the week?
That was not an activity that we were associated with.
All right. Yep, it's, I've seen it multiple places, and we do not pay them to move out of the park. And obviously, some of our concerns earlier this evening, a resident who lives very close to Tussing Park, we know, that they went to Tussing, to Morrison, to other places around town. So I expect they're back at Riverside by now, but I didn't drive by today. All right, that was my only comment. Council, Valerie.
Well, I just did want to take a moment to thank the Active Club for the Boatnik events, because I was absolutely amazed, I guess, at the participation in the parade and the number of people. And I did hear comments of what a great job the police officers did and how well it was, how well it was roped off and taken care of, seeing the cadets going up and down the street on their bicycles, that it was very well orchestrated. So I heard that from people. So I was down there with my grandchildren on Sunday, and we went to the fireworks on Sunday night, and I think that's probably the best fireworks display I have ever seen. So I was quite impressed. So I wanted to give a big cheer and thank you to the Active Club for a great Memorial Day weekend.
Thank you. Anybody else? All right. Congratulations to Kurt. His son-in-law won the race. And thanks to our police for a job well done. Comments from staff?
I just want to thank that acknowledgement of the impact of such a great event to the city operations. It is something that takes a lot of additional time and effort, even in advance of Boatnik, of the city working with the Active Club, from public safety, including fire and police, support services, to parks crews, streets crews. We're all hands on deck. We put in a lot of extra hours and effort to help build community and have a wonderful event, and we do appreciate the Active Club for doing that again this year. Thank you, staff.
Yeah, we can't forget our park staff. Riverside Park looks great, huh? Street crews, a lot of work for the parade. Any other comments, guys? Jason.
Just super quick. Keep your eyes on the Josephine Community Transit buses. All of your Drinking Water Week poster winners are plastered on the sides of the buses. It's pretty awesome. And this year, because COVID has ended, I've been able to hand out a lot of the prizes to the kids this year because they've been coming in to pick up their photos. And so it's been pretty neat to be able to shake their hands and tell them what a great job they've done. And they've been very excited.
Great. Did you give them a free glass of water?
No.
All right, anything further tonight?
We do have some committee openings. Committee on Public Art has one position open, Historical Building and Sites Commission, one position, Housing Advisory Committee, 2 positions, Urban Tree Advisory Committee, 4 positions, Bikeways and Walkways, 2, and Parks Advisory, 2, and all the information can be found on our website.
Thanks, Karen. All right, I'm just gonna sit around and look at each other for a while now, Val.
Or I can make a motion that we adjourn.
Oh, okay, thank you. Second? Thank you, Vanessa. All in favor of adjourning this evening?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, we'll see you Monday.